What if the person you trusted most was the one trying to kill you? Richard Langley, a powerful billionaire CEO, raised his glass for a toast at an exclusive gala, only to be seconds away from death. The drink was poisoned, but just before he could take a sip, a mysterious woman lunged forward, knocking it from his hand. That woman, Elena Vasquez, a nurse who had no reason to be there, except for a gut feeling that something was very, very wrong. What starts as a simple act of instinct turns into a deadly conspiracy, pulling Elena into a web of lies, betrayal, and secrets buried deep within one of the world's most powerful corporations. Who really wants Langley dead? Why? And more importantly, how far are they willing to go to finish the job? Murder. Power. A conspiracy bigger than anyone imagined. This isn't just about survival. It's about exposing the truth before it's too late. Stay until the end, because nothing is what it seems. The Skyline Grand Hotel stood as a beacon of wealth and power, towering over the shimmering skyline of New York. Its sleek glass exterior reflected the twinkling city lights, a silent declaration that only the elite could pass through its golden doors. Tonight, it was the venue of the most exclusive charity gala of the season, a luxurious event attended by the world's most influential figures. Inside the grand ballroom, a magnificent golden chandelier cast a warm, opulent glow over the lavishly decorated space. Guests dressed in couture designs from Milan and Paris glided across the marble floor, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a live string quartet. The scent of imported roses, aged wine, and expensive cologne lingered in the air. Waiters moved between clusters of guests, balancing trays of premium champagne and hors d'oeuvres prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. Elena Vasquez adjusted the emerald green silk dress she had reluctantly borrowed for the occasion. She didn't belong here. She knew that the moment she stepped into the sea of wealth and privilege. She had never been one for grand social events, but her best friend Sophia, a catering manager at the Skyline Grand, had convinced her to attend last minute. "Come on, Elena," Sophia had pleaded. "For once, enjoy yourself. Just pretend you're one of them for a night." Elena had agreed, though she wasn't sure why. Maybe she wanted a break from the exhausting shifts at the hospital, or maybe she just needed to feel something different. She took a sip of her champagne, savoring the crisp taste of the chilled golden liquid. As she moved toward the balcony for some fresh air, a sudden shift in the room's energy caught her attention. A hush rippled through the crowd, followed by an excited murmur. Richard Langley had arrived. The billionaire CEO of Langley Enterprises strode into the ballroom like a man who owned the world, and perhaps, in some ways, he did. His tailored black tuxedo hugged his broad shoulders perfectly, his silver-streaked hair impeccably styled. He was a man who commanded attention without effort, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room as if assessing his kingdom. Elena had never met him in person, but she had seen his face in business magazines, stock reports, and television interviews. He was powerful, wealthy, and notoriously ruthless in business. She was about to turn away when something caught her eye. A waiter moving carefully through the crowd, balancing a silver tray filled with crystal champagne flutes. Something was off. Elena's nose twitched at an almost imperceptible scent in the air. It wasn't the floral perfumes or the aroma of expensive whiskey. It was something bitter, something that shouldn't be there. A strange sensation crept up her spine as she watched the tray being passed to Langley. The CEO took one of the delicate champagne glasses, raising it effortlessly as he prepared for a toast. Then it hit her, bitter almonds. Her heart slammed against her ribs. No, no, no. Elena barely had time to think. She acted on instinct. She lunged forward, knocking the glass out of Langley's grasp just as it was about to touch his lips. The flute crashed onto the marble floor, golden liquid splashing across Langley's polished black shoes. Gasps filled the room. Langley recoiled, his expression darkening with fury as his piercing blue eyes snapped to Elena. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he growled. Before she could answer, his body swayed. His eyes widened slightly, his breath coming in short, labored gasps. Then he collapsed. Chaos erupted. Elena had seen many emergencies in her years working in the ER, but nothing like this. Langley lay sprawled across the ballroom floor, motionless, his tuxedo rumpled, his face unnaturally pale. A ring of stunned guests formed around him, their glamorous evening wear a stark contrast to the chilling scene before them. The security team stormed in within seconds, shoving guests aside as they assessed their fallen boss. One of them, a tall, muscular man with a shaved head, turned to Elena with murder in his eyes. "You," he snapped. "Step back, now." Elena didn't move. "He's been poisoned," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "He needs immediate medical attention. You need to leave." The guard took a menacing step forward. Elena squared her shoulders. "I'm a nurse. I can help." But another voice cut through the tension. "Let her through." The crowd parted as a tall, sharp-featured man in his 40s strode forward. He wore a dark navy suit, his expression calm, but his gaze calculating. Detective Julian Carter. Elena recognized him immediately. He was a well-known homicide detective, often seen on the news, solving high-profile cases. His piercing blue eyes locked onto her, measuring her every move. "What happened?" he asked. Elena swallowed hard. "I smelled cyanide in his drink." Carter's brow lifted slightly, but before he could respond, a security officer rushed over, his face grim. "Sir, we just got word," he said in a low, urgent tone. Langley's stable but unresponsive. "And?" He hesitated, glancing at Elena. "And what?" Carter pressed. The officer exhaled sharply. His head of security was found dead in the parking lot. Elena's blood turned to ice. Langley was poisoned. His security chief was dead. This wasn't an accident. Carter's jaw tightened. Cause of death: execution-style gunshot. Looks like a professional hit. The detective muttered a curse under his breath. Then, he turned back to Elena. "You're coming with me." She stiffened. "I didn't do anything." "Then prove it." Before she could protest, two officers grabbed her arms, leading her through the ballroom, past the sea of murmuring guests. She was ushered into a private conference room at the far end of the hotel. The heavy wooden door shut behind her with an ominous click. Carter sat across from her, his eyes unblinking. "Tell me everything you know." Elena took a deep breath, willing her hands to stop shaking. "His drink was poisoned," she said again. "I smelled cyanide. That's why I knocked it away." Carter studied her, his expression unreadable. "How do you know what cyanide smells like?" "I'm a nurse. I've treated poisoning cases before." For a moment, the detective said nothing. Then, he leaned back. "You expect me to believe that you, a random guest, just happened to detect cyanide in a glass of champagne before the CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the world could take a sip?" Elena met his gaze. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Then, the door burst open. Another officer entered, holding a sealed plastic bag. Inside was a fragment of glass from Langley's shattered champagne flute. "The lab confirmed it, sir," the officer said. The drink was laced with cyanide. Carter's expression hardened. Elena exhaled sharply. She had been right, but that meant something far worse. Someone in this building had just tried to kill Richard Langley. And whoever they were, they wouldn't stop until they finished the job. Elena's breath came in steady, measured waves, but her mind raced. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the polished wood of the table reflecting the coldness of the moment. Across from her, Detective Carter remained still, watching, waiting. "You're saying someone tried to assassinate Richard Langley," Carter said finally, his tone skeptical but controlled. "I'm saying his drink was poisoned." "That's a fact," Elena corrected, holding his gaze. "And I stopped him from drinking it." Carter leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "And you just happened to smell cyanide in a champagne flute. You expect me to believe that?" Elena clenched her jaw. "I work in an ER. Cyanide poisoning has a distinct scent, bitter almonds. I recognized it immediately." Before Carter could press further, a sharp knock on the door interrupted them. One of his officers entered, handing him a small slip of paper. Carter's expression darkened as he scanned it. His eyes flicked up to meet hers. Langley is still unconscious, but stable. However, he hesitated. Choosing his words carefully, someone left a message at his private hospital suite. A chill crept up Elena's spine. A message. Carter nodded and slid the paper across the table. 3 words, printed in crisp black ink. Stay silent, Elena. Elena's heart stuttered in her chest. How do they know my name? She whispered. Carter exhaled sharply, shaking his head. That's the real question, isn't it? She stared at the paper, as if it might reveal something more if she looked hard enough. But it was just ink on a page, simple and terrifying. Someone knew she had interfered. Someone was warning her. She swallowed, forcing her voice to stay even. What does this mean? Carter folded his hands on the table. It means you're not just a witness anymore. It means whoever did this thinks you're a problem. Elena's stomach twisted. They want me to stop asking questions. Carter's expression hardened. Or else. She sat back, running a hand through her hair. It wasn't just about Langley anymore. She was in the middle of something bigger than she had realized. For the first time, she wasn't just a nurse in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a target. Elena didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside her apartment made her flinch. Every shadow beneath the door sent a spike of unease down her spine. The note sat on her coffee table, taunting her. Stay silent, Elena. Whoever left knew where she lived. By sunrise, she had done enough research to form a theory. Victor Holloway, Langley's fiercest business rival. A man known for destroying competition without mercy. If anyone had a motive, it was him. But would he really risk an assassination? She grabbed her phone and scrolled through articles about Holloway. His company had been in a brutal takeover battle with Langley's for months. A merger was at stake, one that could make or break an empire. If Langley died, Holloway stood to gain everything. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. She froze, her fingers curled around the edge of her coffee table. Slowly, she stood and crept toward the peephole. Nothing. She hesitated, then unlocked the door and cracked it open. Nobody was there. Her pulse hammered against her ribs as she looked down. A white envelope had been taped to the doorframe. Elena swallowed hard, fingers trembling as she peeled it free and unfolded the single sheet inside. 3 words, written in careful, deliberate handwriting. It needs to look like an accident. A chill slithered through her veins. She turned the note over. No signature, no return address, just those ominous words. It wasn't over. Langley's poisoning wasn't an isolated attempt. Someone was still planning something. She backed away from the door, shutting it and locking it tight. Her gut screamed at her. This was a second warning, and she was running out of time to figure out who was behind it. The city lights blurred into golden streaks as Elena gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing. The words from a second note played over and over in her head. It needs to look like an accident. She didn't know where else to go. The hospital. No, Langley was still unconscious, and the last thing she wanted was to walk into another trap. The police. Maybe Carter would help her, but she had nothing solid. Just warnings and gut instincts. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It's happening tonight. Her stomach clenched. She slammed the brakes at a red light, fumbling to type back. Who is this? What's happening tonight? No reply. She exhaled sharply and made a snap decision. She needed to get to Langley. If there was another attempt coming, she had to be there to stop it. 15 minutes later, she pushed through the main entrance of Langley's private hospital suite. The corridor was eerily quiet. A single security guard stood at the far end, barely acknowledging her presence. Langley lay motionless in the dimly lit room, hooked up to machines, his breathing slow but steady. Elena took a step closer, then froze. The 4-line. It had been adjusted. The drip was moving faster than before. Her heart slammed into her ribs. She yanked the line free and grabbed a spare syringe, drawing a sample of the clear liquid. Her fingers trembled as she held it up to the light. Then she saw it. Tiny, barely visible particles swirling in the solution. Poison. The second attempt was already happening. A rustling behind her made her spin around. The security guard stood in the doorway, watching her. His hand moved toward his hip. A gun. Elena's breath hitched. He wasn't security. She darted for the emergency alarm, slamming her palm against the red button just as the imposter lunged at her. The room filled with sirens. Elena hit the ground hard, pain jolting up her shoulder as the fake guard's weight crushed her. His hand clamped over her mouth, his grip rough, suffocating. "Should have stayed out of this," he hissed. She bit down on his palm, hard. He cursed and loosened his grip just enough for her to throw her elbow back, slamming it into his ribs. She scrambled away, knocking over a tray of medical supplies. The door burst open. Detective Carter and two uniformed officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Freeze!" Carter barked. The imposter hesitated for half a second, then lunged for his gun. Carter fired first. The gunshot rang through the room. The man staggered back, clutching his bleeding shoulder before collapsing against the medical cart. Elena pressed a shaking hand against her chest, struggling to slow her breathing. Carter holstered his gun and turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No," but Langley almost was. She motioned toward the 4-line. Someone tampered with it. There was something in the solution. Carter's jaw tightened as he crouched beside the imposter, who was gasping in pain. "You work for Holloway?" Carter demanded. The man's lip curled. "You think Holloway's the one pulling the strings?" He let out a weak laugh. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Elena's blood went cold. Carter narrowed his eyes. "Then enlighten me." The imposter smirked. "You'll find out soon enough." A strangled gurgling sound escaped his throat. His eyes rolled back. Elena rushed forward, pressing her fingers against his neck. "No pulse." Carter cursed under his breath. "Cyanide capsule." He took his own way out. Elena felt the air shift around her. The silence was suffocating. She had thought this was about business, about Holloway. But now, she wasn't sure anymore. If Holloway wasn't behind it, then who the hell was? Elena sat in Carter's car, the city blurring past the rain-speckled windows. Her fingers tapped anxiously against her knee, the events of the last 24 hours replaying in her mind like a looping nightmare. Langley had barely survived 2 assassination attempts. One by poisoning, another by a silent assassin in a fake security uniform. And yet, the biggest question remained. Who wanted him dead so badly? Carter, his hands firm on the wheel, broke the silence. "We need to look at motive." Elena exhaled sharply. "The obvious answer is Holloway." Carter shook his head. "Maybe. But there's something bigger at play here. That guy in Langley's hospital room, he wasn't just a hired gun. He knew something. And he died before he could spill it." Elena swallowed, trying to push away the unsettling feeling curling in her stomach. Then Carter's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and cursed under his breath. "What?" Elena asked. Carter pulled into an empty parking lot, put the car in park, and turned to face her. "Langley's lawyer just sent me something. He updated his will 2 days before the gala." Elena blinked. "What does that mean?" Carter's jaw tightened. "It means someone close to him knew what was coming, and they were positioning themselves for when he was gone." Elena frowned. "Who benefits from the changes?" Carter's eyes met hers, and a shiver ran down her spine at the weight in them. "Sophia Grayson," he said. "His fiancée." Elena's breath caught. The woman who had barely reacted when Langley collapsed. She had everything to gain if he died, and that made her the most dangerous person in the room. The penthouse was too perfect. Elena stood in Sophia Grayson's sleek, modern living room, her eyes scanning the pristine white furniture, the tastefully arranged artwork, the towering floor-to-ceiling windows. It looked more like a stage set than a home. Sophia sat gracefully on a leather couch, her expression composed, a faint smirk on her lips. She twirled the stem of a wine glass between her fingers, watching Elena and Carter like they were an amusing little puzzle. Carter didn't waste time. Richard updated his will 2 days before the gala, he said. And you're the primary beneficiary. Sophia sipped her wine, her movements effortless. I would hope so. We were engaged. Elena stepped forward. Did you know about the change? Sophia raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Of course not. Richard never discussed his finances with me. Elena crossed her arms. You didn't seem surprised when he collapsed. Sophia tilted her head, her expression unreadable. I don't overreact in public. That doesn't mean I wasn't concerned. Carter leaned in. Someone's been trying to kill Langley. Maybe more than one person. We have reason to believe the poisoning wasn't the end of it. Sophia sighed, setting her glass down. Detective, if you think I had anything to do with this, you're wasting your time. I loved Richard. Elena didn't believe her. Carter studied Sophia for a long moment, then pulled something from his coat pocket. A copy of the will. He slid it onto the glass coffee table. Then you won't mind explaining why Richard transferred all of his personal assets to a secret offshore account 2 days before he was poisoned. Sophia's fingers twitched. For the first time, her mask cracked. Elena leaned in. Where is the money, Sophia? The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She picked up her wine glass again, but her hand trembled. Carter didn't blink. If you're not involved, prove it. Sophia's gaze flickered between them. Then, after a long pause, she exhaled sharply and said, You're looking in the wrong direction. Elena's stomach turned. Then, tell us where to look. Sophia hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Victor Holloway wasn't the one Richard was afraid of. Elena's pulse pounded in her ears. Carter narrowed his eyes. Then who? Sophia's voice was steady. The people inside his own company. Elena sat across from Carter in his office, her hands gripping a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The room felt dimmer than before, the weight of Sophia's words pressing down on them. The people inside his own company. Carter rubbed a hand over his jaw. If Langley wasn't afraid of Holloway, that means we're dealing with an internal conspiracy. Elena's mind spun. People who already had access to him. People who would need to break in or fake security credentials. Carter nodded. His board, executives, maybe even people in his personal staff. He grabbed a file and tossed it onto the desk. I had my team pull Langley's company records. You might want to take a look at this. Elena leaned forward, flipping through pages of financial transactions and internal emails. Her eyes stopped on something that made her stomach lurch. A vault record. Langley accessed a private vault the day before the gala, she murmured. Carter's expression hardened. Not just any vault. His company has a restricted access archive, one even his own CFO can't get into. Langley went in alone and stayed for almost an hour. Elena swallowed. Whatever he took or left in there must be important. Carter exhaled. The problem is, since his hospitalization, the vault has been locked under a security override. No one can get in. Elena's pulse quickened. Unless Langley wakes up. Carter's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen before tensing. He lifted his gaze to hers, his expression unreadable. That might not be a problem anymore. Elena's breath caught. He's awake. Carter stood, grabbing his coat. Let's go find out. Elena stepped into Langley's hospital room, her heart pounding. Machines beeped steadily, the soft hum of medical equipment filling the space. Langley was awake. His blue eyes flicked toward them as Carter approached the bedside. His face was pale, but his expression remained controlled. A man who refused to appear weak, even at death's door. Elena Vasquez. His voice was hoarse. I hear I owe you my life. She exhaled. Twice, actually. Langley gave the faintest smirk. Remind me to send a fruit basket. Carter stepped forward. Mr. Langley, we need to know what you were doing in your company's restricted vault before the gala. Langley studied them, his sharp mind already working. Then, after a pause, he said, I was securing something before someone could take it from me. Elena's breath hitched. What? Langley's fingers twitched against the sheets. Evidence. Carter narrowed his eyes. Evidence of what? Langley inhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to say. Someone inside my company has been embezzling millions through offshore accounts. When I found out, I started collecting proof. But the more I dug, the more I realized they weren't just stealing. They were planning something bigger. Elena felt a shiver run through her. Like what? Langley's eyes darkened. A takeover. A silent coup. And if I hadn't updated my will, I'd already be dead. Carter crossed his arms. Who's behind it? Langley hesitated. Then, just as he opened his mouth, the power in the hospital flickered. Elena's pulse spiked. The machines around them glitched, the monitors flashing red before the screen displays cut to black. A surge of panic ran through her as Carter reached for his gun. The hospital went completely dark. And then, gunfire erupted from the hallway. Gunfire exploded in the hallway. Elena instinctively dropped to the floor, her heart slamming against her ribs as Carter pulled his gun, positioning himself between her and the door. The dim emergency lighting flickered, casting eerie shadows across Langley's hospital room. The machines beside his bed beeped erratically, the only other sound in the tense silence that followed the gunshots. "Stay down," Carter ordered, voice low but firm. Elena didn't need to be told twice. Langley, pale but fully alert, exhaled slowly. "They're here." Carter's jaw clenched. "Who?" Langley met his gaze. "The ones who didn't want me to wake up." A second round of gunfire erupted, closer this time. Shouts echoed from the hallway, officers responding, a struggle breaking out. Then, silence. Carter lifted his gun and motioned for Elena to stay put as he moved toward the door. The hallway was dark, only emergency lights glowing above. A shadow moved near the corner. Carter raised his weapon. "Show yourself." The figure hesitated, then stepped forward, Detective Marcus Tate. Carter exhaled. "Tate, what the hell is going on?" Tate's face was grim. Two men tried to breach the hospital wing. One's down, the other fled. Carter turned to Langley. "We need to move you. Now." Langley pushed himself up slightly, wincing. "Where?" Elena had an answer before Carter did. "The vault," she said. Both men turned to her. Langley raised an eyebrow. "You want to hide me in my own company?" Elena straightened. "It's the safest place right now. Whoever is after you, they don't just want you dead. They want whatever you were protecting. If you're inside that vault, at least they can't get to either." Langley considered her, then gave a slight nod. "Let's move." The sleek black SUV raced through the darkened streets, moving fast but cautious. Carter drove, his jaw tight, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Elena sat beside Langley in the back seat, feeling the weight of his presence. He was a man used to control, yet here he was, a hunted man, forced into hiding. "You were prepared for this," she murmured, watching him. Langley didn't respond immediately. Then, in a quiet, measured tone, he said, "I suspected it." She studied him. "Why didn't you leave? Why come to the gala knowing someone wanted you dead?" A bitter smirk ghosted across his lips. "Because if I ran, they would have won before the fight even started." Elena wasn't sure if that was bravery or arrogance. Carter's voice cut through. "We're approaching the building." Langley's company headquarters loomed ahead, a towering glass structure, the city's reflection shimmering off its dark windows. The vault was inside, buried beneath layers of security. Carter pulled into an underground parking garage, stopping at a private entrance. Two of Langley's personal security team were already waiting. They moved fast, ushering Langley inside. Elena followed, her pulse spiking as they stepped into an elevator that descended into the heart of the building. The vault was more than just a safe. It was a panic room, built for scenarios exactly like this. Reinforced steel walls, limited access, no way in or out without biometric clearance. Langley placed his hand against a scanner, and the heavy door slid open. Elena stepped inside, her eyes immediately locking onto a black briefcase sitting on a sleek metal table. "This is what they want," Langley said, his voice edged with certainty. Carter closed the vault door behind them. Then let's see what's inside. Langley flipped open the case. Inside was a stack of documents, neatly arranged. But it wasn't the paperwork that caught Elena's attention. It was a small USB drive nestled in a compartment. Langley picked it up, holding it between his fingers. "This is proof of everything," he murmured. Elena's stomach twisted. "And if it gets out?" Langley met her gaze. "Then the people coming after me lose everything." Carter exhaled. "Which means they won't stop." Then, suddenly, the lights flickered. The vault went into lockdown, and the security screen displayed a chilling message. "Access breached. Security override initiated." Someone had just locked them inside. The vault's steel walls reflected the dim emergency lighting as a chilling silence settled over the room. The security screen blinked, the words, "Access breached. Security override initiated," glowing red like a warning siren without sound. Elena's pulse hammered. What just happened? Carter moved to the security panel, his fingers flying over the keypad. "Someone's locked us in." His jaw tightened. "And whoever did it just cut off external access." Langley exhaled, rubbing his temple. "That means someone on the inside knows we're here." Elena turned to him. "Is there another way out?" Langley shook his head. "Not unless you have a code only 3 people in the world know." Carter spun to face him. "And who are those 3? Langley's expression darkened. "My CFO, my head of security," he hesitated. "And my fiancée." Elena's stomach twisted. "Sophia." Langley inhaled sharply. "She has override clearance. If we're locked in, it means she's the one who triggered it." Carter cursed. "That means she's not just covering for someone. She's working with them." Elena felt a cold weight settle over her. Sophia had lied. She had claimed Holloway wasn't a real threat, that it was someone inside Langley's company. But now, she was the threat. Langley straightened, his face unreadable. "If she locked us in, then she's making her move. And that means we need to act fast." Carter turned to the security panel, typing in a series of commands. The screen flashed, restricted in bold red letters. He tried again. Same result. "Damn it," he muttered. Elena looked at the USB drive still in Langley's hand. "What's on it?" Langley hesitated. Then he sighed and plugged the drive into a laptop on the table. The screen flickered to life, displaying a list of offshore accounts, financial transactions, and coded messages. Elena's breath caught. "This is evidence of money laundering." Langley nodded grimly. "Not just laundering. Bribes. Corruption. A shadow network of people funding illegal activities." His voice dropped. "And Sophia is at the center of it." Carter's fists clenched. "Then we have everything we need to bring her down." Langley exhaled sharply. "If we make it out alive..." Just then, the vault's intercom crackled. A familiar voice filtered through. Calm, poised, and laced with amusement. "Sophia, darling," she purred. "I hoped you'd stay asleep a little longer." Langley's jaw tightened. "You locked us in." A soft chuckle. "Of course I did. I needed time to restructure things. And you waking up, that was very inconvenient for me." Elena stepped forward. "You tried to kill him." Sophia hummed. "Tried? Oh, sweetheart, you misunderstand. I wasn't trying. I was ensuring. But you ruined that, didn't you?" Carter's voice was low, deadly. "You poisoned him. You set up the hospital attack." Sophia sighed. "I did what needed to be done. Richard was never going to step aside willingly." Langley's knuckles turned white. "So, you took my money, sold me out." Sophia's voice sharpened. "Don't act surprised. You knew what I was capable of." A pause. Then, cool and detached, she added, "Oh, and by the way, I have Holloway, too." Langley stiffened. "What?" Sophia chuckled. "He thought he was the mastermind, thought he was the one pulling the strings. But he was just a pawn. I let him believe he was part of the plan, until he outlived his usefulness." Elena's blood ran cold. Sophia continued, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Now let's make a deal. Give me the drive, and I'll consider letting you live." Langley's eyes darkened. You won't let us walk out of here? Sophia sighed. Probably not. A brief pause. But wouldn't you rather take a slower death than the alternative? Then, the intercom cut out. A heavy silence settled in the vault. Elena's pulse pounded. She's coming. Langley nodded. And she's bringing an army. The vault's silence stretched, thick with tension. Carter turned to Langley. How many people does she have? Langley's lips pressed into a thin line. Enough. Elena swallowed. We need to get out of here before they come in. Langley's fingers hovered over the laptop keys. There's a failsafe. A manual override. But it'll take time. Carter pulled his gun. Then we better make sure we have enough of it. Elena's breath hitched as the security panel blinked again. A new message appeared. Unlocking in 30 seconds. Langley's fingers tensed. She's letting them in. Carter positioned himself by the entrance. Gun aimed. Elena, when that door opens, you move. Elena's heart pounded. And go where? Langley didn't hesitate. To the server room. Upstairs. If you can broadcast the files on the drive, Sophia loses everything. Elena nodded. Okay. Carter gave her a sharp look. I'll cover you. The screen flashed. 10 seconds. Elena's stomach twisted. 5 seconds. A deep breath. Door unlocked. The steel door slid open. Chaos exploded. Armed men stormed in. Gunfire erupted. Carter fired the first shot, dropping one of Sophia's men instantly. Langley ducked behind a table as bullets ricocheted off the metal walls. Elena bolted. She sprinted through the chaos, dodging debris, heart slamming against her ribs. Sophia's voice rang out behind her. Stop her. Elena didn't stop. She shoved through a side door, slammed it shut, and ran. Sophia was right behind her. Elena, Sophia called, her voice deceptively calm. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Elena ignored her. The server room was just ahead. Her lungs burned as she reached the door. Locked. Sophia's footsteps approached. Elena turned, breathless, shaking, and saw the gun aimed at her chest. Sophia smiled. Game over. Elena's fingers tightened around the USB drive. If she was going down, she wasn't going down alone. Elena's pulse pounded as she stared down the barrel of Sophia's gun. The server room door was locked behind her. The only thing standing between her and the evidence that could destroy Sophia's empire was the woman herself, smirking, poised, ready to pull the trigger. Elena, Sophia sighed, cocking her head. You don't seem like the reckless type. Hand me the drive, and we both walk away. Elena clutched the USB drive in her palm, her breath coming in sharp gasps. You're lying. Sophia's lips curled into something between amusement and irritation. Of course I am. Then she fired. Elena dived sideways, the bullet shattering the panel beside her. Sparks erupted as the emergency lights flickered. No hesitation. Sophia was trying to kill her. Adrenaline surged through her. Elena scrambled forward, using a fallen cabinet as cover. Sophia fired again, this time barely missing her shoulder. Elena, Sophia called, voice laced with mock patience. You're only making this harder. Elena wasn't listening. She spotted her chance. The emergency fire alarm, just a few feet ahead. She lunged, slammed her elbow against the glass, and pulled the handle. A deafening siren blared through the building. The hallway flooded with red warning lights. Automatic lockdown sequences triggered. Metal shutters groaned as they began sealing off exits. Sophia cursed. Damn it. Elena didn't wait. She ran. Sophia's voice chased her. You won't make it out, Vasquez. But that was the thing. Elena didn't need to escape. She just needed to get the files uploaded. She sprinted toward a side door and burst into the main server room. Rows of blinking machines surrounded her. She fumbled to plug the USB drive into the nearest terminal. The screen flickered, loading the data. Proof of embezzlement, corruption, illegal transactions. Everything. A progress bar crawled across the screen. 75%. Footsteps. Sophia was coming. Elena's fingers trembled as the upload bar reached 80%. Sophia's heels clicked against the tile floor, slow, deliberate. The sound sent ice through Elena's veins. "You're out of time," Sophia called. "I admire your fight, but this is over." Elena's pulse thundered. Not yet. She glanced at the screen. 85%. Almost there. Sophia appeared in the doorway, gun raised. "Step away from the computer." Elena's body screamed to obey, to surrender, to stop fighting. But her mind was sharper, fueled by pure survival instinct. Instead, she grabbed a server tower and yanked it down. It crashed onto the floor, a cascade of wires snapping free. Sparks flew, and the lights flickered. Sophia flinched, just for a second. Elena seized the moment. She lunged, slamming into Sophia's arm. The gun went off, the bullet tearing through the air just inches from her face. Pain exploded in Elena's side as she hit the floor hard, but she ignored it. She rolled away, reaching for the overturned gun. Sophia kicked it out of reach. "Nice try." Sophia's voice was clipped, breathless. She raised the gun again, but not good enough. Elena's chest heaved as she watched Sophia steady her aim. Then, the computer beeped. "Upload complete." Sophia's smirk vanished. She whipped around toward the screen, eyes widening in pure horror as the files began transmitting. Live. No. Elena barely had time to react before Sophia spun back, fury twisting her face. She grabbed Elena by the collar and yanked her up, slamming her against a server tower. "You ruined everything," Sophia shrieked. Elena gasped for air, her vision swimming. "No, Sophia." "You did." Sophia raised the gun again. A gunshot rang out. For a second, Elena thought she'd been shot. But then, Sophia's grip loosened. Her expression flickered. Shock, pain, realization. She stumbled backward, her hand pressing against a gunshot wound in her stomach. Carter stood in the doorway, his weapon still raised. Sophia's lips parted in disbelief. "You." She collapsed. Elena sucked in a ragged breath, her body sagging with exhaustion. Carter lowered his gun and stepped forward, his voice firm but steady. "It's over." Elena turned to screen. The files were gone, uploaded, broadcasted, sent to multiple law enforcement agencies, journalists, and watchdog groups. The world knew the truth. Sophia let out a weak, bitter laugh, blood staining her dress. "Do you really think this ends here?" Carter stepped closer. "Yeah, I do." A few moments later, sirens wailed outside as the building was swarmed by law enforcement. The fight was over. But Elena had a feeling this story wasn't finished yet. Elena sat on the steps outside Langley Enterprises, her breath still uneven as she watched the sea of flashing police lights reflected against the towering glass building. Officers moved in and out, securing the scene, escorting out detained suspects, and collecting evidence. Sophia Grayson was gone, arrested, bleeding, and broken. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a temporary pause in a much larger battle. Carter stood beside her, silent, his hands tucked into his coat pockets as he watched the chaos unfold. "You did it," he finally said. The files went public. Every government agency, journalist, and watchdog group now has proof of Langley's company corruption. Elena exhaled, rubbing her hands together to calm the tremors. And what happens now? Carter's gaze remained fixed on the scene. Langley's empire falls apart. Investigations will tear through every deal, every offshore account, every bribe. And everyone involved, including him, will have to answer for it. Elena turned to look at Langley, standing by the entrance, speaking with his personal attorney. Even in ruin, he looked composed, like a man calculating his next move. She should have hated him. After all, his company had fueled corruption, bribery, and destruction. But something about him told her he wasn't just another greedy CEO. Langley turned toward her, holding her gaze. Then, slowly, he walked over. "Elena." His voice was quieter than usual, but still controlled. She crossed her arms. "I suppose you're here to thank me for saving your life." Langley gave a half smirk. Something like that. Though, I have to say, I didn't expect you to burn my empire down in the process. Elena held his gaze. Then maybe you should have cleaned house before they try to clean you out. Langley chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Fair enough. He glanced toward the swarm of FBI agents combing through his building. They'll pick apart every inch of my company now. Carter stepped in. And what happens when they find something that leads back to you? Langley didn't blink. Then I take responsibility. Elena studied him, trying to read between the lines. You knew, didn't you? She asked. That something like this was coming? Langley exhaled slowly. I knew someone was moving against me. I didn't know it was Sophia. His voice darkened. And I didn't know how deep the corruption ran. Carter eyed him. If we find evidence against you, Langley, I won't stop the feds from coming after you. Langley smirked slightly. I wouldn't expect you to. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence. Then Langley reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple, unmarked envelope. This is for you, he said, holding it out to Elena. She hesitated. What is it? Langley's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Consider it a parting gift. Elena frowned, but took it. Before she could ask more, Langley turned and walked away, disappearing into the chaos. She looked down at the envelope. Carter raised an eyebrow. Are you going to open it? Elena tore it open. Inside was a single key and a card with an address written on it. Carter frowned. That's not what I expected. Neither was Elena. She pocketed the key and inhaled sharply. Something told her this wasn't over. Elena stood outside an old, abandoned office building in the quieter part of the city, gripping the key Langley had given her. Carter had offered to come, but something in her gut told her this was something she needed to do alone. The street was empty. No security. No cameras. Just a forgotten place, hiding something no one wanted found. She inserted the key into the rusted lock and pushed open the door. The smell of dust and aged paper filled her lungs as she stepped inside. Rows of old filing cabinets stretched along the walls. A single desk sat in the middle of the room, covered in folders, newspapers, and a single laptop. Elena hesitated before moving closer. The first file was labeled Project Red Veil. Her brows furrowed as she flipped it open. Documents detailing a secret initiative involving Langley Enterprises and various high-profile companies. But the more she read, the worse it got. Medical experiments, human trials, illegal testing. Elena's stomach twisted as she saw photos of patients, some sick, some missing. Her hands trembled as she turned the page, and then she froze. Her sister's name was on the list. A shudder ran down her spine. No, it couldn't be, but it was. Her sister, who had mysteriously died in a hospital accident years ago, was listed as a test subject. Elena's vision blurred with fury. Her hands clawed into the paper as the weight of the revelation crushed her. She had thought this was about Langley's corruption, about stopping a power-hungry CEO. But this was bigger. This was personal. She grabbed the USB drive still in her pocket and plugged it into the laptop. She needed to see what else was hidden. The screen flickered to life. One file stood out among the others. A video. She clicked play. A grainy recording filled the screen. A secret meeting between Langley, Holloway, and another man she didn't recognize. Langley's voice came through first. We shouldn't be doing this. Holloway laughed. It's already done. Then the third man spoke, his voice calm and controlled. We had a test on them, Richard. There was no other way. Elena's stomach churned. Langley had known. He had been part of whatever this was. Her entire body shook. Then, the laptop screen flickered. A new message popped up. Unknown sender. You've seen too much. Elena's breath hitched. Then, somewhere outside the building, a car engine roared to life. Someone was coming for her. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. The laptop screen still flickered, the warning message burning into her vision. Unknown sender. You've seen too much. Then, a car engine revved outside. She acted on instinct. Elena grabbed the USB drive, stuffed it into her pocket, and slammed the laptop shut. Her fingers fumbled for the files on the desk, but footsteps crunched on gravel outside. Someone was already here. Her breath hitched as she spotted a silhouette moving past the window. They weren't knocking. They weren't calling out. They were hunting her. She scanned the room, searching for an exit. The back door. Elena moved silently, her pulse hammering as she reached for the handle. A gunshot shattered the silence. Glass exploded from the window. Elena ducked, her ears ringing. A bullet buried itself into the desk where she had been standing a second ago. Her body moved before her mind could process it. She bolted. The back door flew open as she raced into the alley, her feet pounding against the pavement. More gunfire. Sparks flew as bullets struck metal dumpsters. A voice shouted behind her. "Vasquez, stop running." She didn't recognize it. That terrified her more. Adrenaline surged as she tore through the alley, pushing her legs harder. She spotted a chain-link fence ahead, her only way out. She jumped, hands gripping the cold steel. She climbed. Footsteps pounded behind her. She threw herself over just as a bullet ripped through her jacket sleeve. She hit the ground hard, but she didn't stop. There was only one place she could go now. Harder. Elena banged on Carter's door, her breath ragged, her jacket torn. The door swung open within seconds. Carter took one look at her and pulled her inside. "What the hell happened?" he demanded. Elena leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. "They found me. Someone was waiting." Carter's eyes flicked over her, assessing for injuries. "You're bleeding." She looked down. Her sleeve was soaked in red. She hadn't even felt the graze. Carter grabbed a towel, pressing it to her arm. "Who's after you?" Elena's throat was dry, but she forced the words out. "Langley, his company. It's bigger than we thought." Carter frowned. "Bigger how?" Elena pulled the USB drive from her pocket and placed it on the table. "Project Red Veil." Carter stiffened. "I found files. They were testing on people, illegal medical experiments. My sister was one of them." Silence crashed into the room. Carter's expression darkened. "Jesus, Elena." Her fingers curled into fists. Langley was part of it. They were all part of it. Carter picked up the USB, staring at it. "If this is as bad as you're saying, you realize what happens next, right?" Elena nodded. "They won't let me walk away." A sharp knock at the door. Both of them froze. Carter reached for his gun, his jaw tightening. "Stay behind me." Elena's stomach twisted. They had found her. Carter moved to the door and peered through the peephole. His entire body went rigid. He turned back, his voice low. "It's Langley." Elena's pulse spiked. Carter exhaled and opened the door. Langley stepped inside, calm as ever. His suit was crisp, his expression unreadable. Carter didn't lower his gun. "You picked the wrong house." Langley smirked. "If I was here to kill you, I wouldn't have knocked." Elena's fists clenched. "Why are you here?" Langley's gaze met hers. "To make sure you stay alive." Elena laughed coldly. "Oh, that's rich." Langley sighed, rubbing his temple. "I knew this would be complicated." Carter narrowed his eyes. "Start talking, now." Langley hesitated. Then, he spoke. "I didn't sanction Red Veil." His voice was quiet, but firm. "I didn't know what was happening. Not until it was too late." Elena didn't believe him. "You expect me to buy that?" Langley's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't know what Holloway and the others were doing. When I found out, I tried to shut it down. That's why they wanted me dead." Elena's hands trembled. "My sister. She was one of their test subjects." "Did you know?" Langley hesitated. That was all the answer she needed. Her breath hitched. "You knew?" Langley exhaled. "I couldn't stop them, Elena. By the time I knew what was happening, she was already gone." Something inside her snapped. She lunged, her fist colliding with his jaw. Langley staggered back. Carter stepped between them, gripping Elena's arm before she could hit him again. "That's enough." Elena's chest heaved. "No, it's not." Langley straightened, wiping blood from his lip. "You have the proof. Use it." Elena froze. Langley met her gaze. Destroy them. Vasquez. Elena's head spun. Why are you helping me? Langley's smirk returned, but there was no humor in it. Because if I go down, I'm taking them all with me. Carter exhaled sharply. Then let's finish this. Elena stared at the USB drive in her hand. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about exposing everything. And she wasn't going to stop until the entire system burned. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this thrilling story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It helps us bring you more exciting content. We'd love to hear from you. What moment in the story impacted you the most? Was it the shocking betrayals, the intense action, or the final confrontation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Also, we want to create stories that you want to see. Have a story idea or a mystery you'd love to unravel? Let us know in the comments, and your suggestion could be featured in a future video. Thanks for being part of this journey. Your support keeps the stories coming.